incumbent Democratic Senator Bob Casey of Pennsylvania now officially has conceded his race to Republican Dave McCormick. In a video posted to social media, Senator Casey said, quote, "As the first count of ballot is completed, Pennsylvanians can move forward with the knowledge that their voices were heard, whether their vote was the first to be counted or the last." In response to Casey's concession, McCormick released a statement that reads in part, "Senator Bob Casey dedicated his career to bettering our Commonwealth. Dina, McCormick's wife, and I want to extend our sincere gratitude to Senator Casey, to Reyes, and their family for their decades of service, hard work, and personal sacrifice." With 99.8% of the vote in, McCormick won the race by just over 16,000 votes. The small margin of victory triggered an automatic recount with the results expected out next Wednesday. Barring any unexpected changes, Republicans will hold the majority in the United States Senate, 53 to 47 seats. So, Joe, we can talk about that balance of power and what it means for the incoming Trump administration. But in these times, we have to say, this is what it looks like to wait out a close race. He lost by only 16,000 votes, automatic recount. He concedes graciously. Dave McCormick gives a gracious statement thanking him for his service in a big win for Republicans in the state of Pennsylvania. But this is how it's supposed to work.
Okay, this sounds shockingly normal. Like, this is how it used to be. Exactly. And I will say, and Willie, we talked about it back in, what year are we in now? Was it 2022? You know, you put Dave McCormick in. If Dave McCormick had won the primary, he could have won against Fetterman, who's a very strong statewide candidate. But make no mistake about it, Dave McCormick winning here. First of all, he is the type of Republican candidate that can win a state like Pennsylvania, a West Point guy, and ran a tough campaign. So give Dave McCormick his due, a great Republican candidate. But I want to talk about what this means for the Democrats, because we had Sherrod Brown on. And I got to say, I knew that a lot of Democrats were going to have trouble this year. Didn't think Sherrod would in Ohio, because he was so connected with working class voters throughout his entire career and got beat. Yeah. Here is the second shot across the bow for Democrats and working class voters. As you know, the Casey family, legend in Pennsylvania. Casey would win. He won his last race by 17 points. Yeah. White working class voters in Pennsylvania loved him, loved his father, stayed with the Caseys through thick and thin, and there weren't ever any close races. He has lost now. And let's look at Ohio. Let's look at Pennsylvania and ask, what does this mean for the Democratic Party? And we wanted you on to talk about this, because everybody I talked to that followed your race said you ran a just about pitch perfect race, and yet the headwinds for you, for Casey, for Brown, just too hard to get past.
The headwinds were tough this cycle. I think particularly, you can run ahead of the ticket, but there's only so much you can do that. And in the case of Ohio, Brown and Casey, that's an Allegheny region problem. That's a white working class problem that a lot of folks are having in the Democratic Party. For me, I think the headwinds, fundamentally, I kept thinking about one of my favorite quotes from Bill Clinton. He said, people will vote for strong and wrong every time. And I think the Democratic Party has a strength problem on the issues that matter most: personal safety and economic security. I think those are the fundamentals. Mm-hmm. And Democrats got to get off defense and playing offense. They can't be the default party of the status quo. I think that's the most dangerous place to be. And I think right now they are seen that way. And so people will take a chance if they seem like they're bold solutions on the other side, even if it flies in the face of facts. And so here's where I think just Democrats, particularly in blue states, need to actually, you need to have a stronger center left standing up against the far right and the far left. I think you need to make sure you're dealing with things like the middle class squeeze, which is one of the biggest drivers of dissatisfaction going on for decades, that the affordability crisis because of inflation kicked even to higher gear. And then make sure you're actually dealing with issues of civic disorder, the border, crime. If you have a well-intentioned bill that has unintended consequences, fix it. But if people feel that the civic decline is going on, Democrats have to be taking that on and being the leaders of that reform. Otherwise, they're going to get caught up in a wave.
But at the same time, John, I think that you're correct. We've got to see the Democrats deal with those issues and go after the working class white, but also the working class
100%.
black community.
100%.
I think that a lot of them played, a lot of Democratic candidates, their consultants, played to the edges and the younger vote and ignored black churches, ignored black fraternities, didn't invest in that. Who are your solid voters who may be more conservative and concerned about immigration, crime, and other things in a different way. And I think they over-engaged some of the things that became trendy, but their base was not energized. Because you could have won enough votes in Philly to make this different for Casey.
Well, and that's a profound point that actually, what happened in Philly, what happened in Milwaukee, what happened in Cleveland. I made a point of going to black churches because I think that's really important.
That's where the voters are.
It's also nourishing, right? But I do think you make the right point, which is, look, people got to get past the identity politics of this, right? And so actually shouldn't just talk about the white working class. My mother's from Youngstown, Ohio, so I think about, that region. But it really is just making sure folks feel like the American dream's accessible again, making sure that the middle class feels like if they work hard and play by the rules, they can get ahead. And right now they don't. And that's where being the default party that seems to represent the status quo is unsustainable.
Hey, John, Sam Stein here.
Hey, man.
Good to see you, bud.
You too, buddy.
John and I worked together in a past lifetime. I was talking with Chris Murphy yesterday about this exact situation. And one of the things that we were talking about, and I'm curious what your thoughts are on how Democrats should maneuver around this, is that you talked about they're perceived as the defenders of the status quo. He agreed with that. That can be an issue. But I think part of the issue here is that Trump kind of forces that to happen. By that I mean, yes, you defend democracy when you feel like it's completely under attack and under assault. You defend immigrants when you feel like they're being scapegoated. You defend the pharmaceutical industry when you feel like an anti-vax person is set to host HHS. It's his actions that cause that type of reaction where you end up being the defenders of the status quo. How do you maneuver around that? Because those things are worth defending even if you have a reformist mindset.
It's a great point. First of all, I don't think you can let your opponent determine the tune that you dance to. Right? I think you need to play offense and get off defense. And I do think that the contrast is with the chaos and extremism that Donald Trump represents. The contrast is, look, we're going to be bold and put forward common sense solutions to the problems of everyday people. We're going to focus on rebuilding the middle of our politics, the middle of our economy. We're going to actually take a note. Look at what that ballot prop that passed in California did, right? People pushed back on a 2-to-1 margin on the idea that we were decriminalizing low-level crime because that created a sense of civic disorder. So I think it's actually pushing back against civic decline is also defending democratic norms. It's actually building a big tent, but you got to be strong on the stuff that people care most about. And I think a lot about something that Hakeem Jeffries said, but could have said, even more, and I'd take it as a mantra. It's the 4 Fs. Democrats need to be back on reclaiming the values of freedom, which Kamala Harris did on reproductive freedom, fairness, which cuts both ways in some ways that Democrats don't want to deal with on the border, the flag, and faith, right? Reclaiming patriotism, reclaiming the social gospel, those traditions that I think can reanimate a new Democratic Party and not have it just responding to Donald Trump. That's no way to live. It's no way to win.
All right, let's get specific here. I want to get specific. So I'll just talk about myself. I talked a lot over 2 years about fascist rhetoric, threats of retribution. Mika talked a lot about women's reproductive rights, women's reproductive health care, freedom for women to decide what they do with their bodies. And we talked about that a lot. And after the election, 75 million voters or so said, well, okay, we're focused on the price of gas, price of groceries, whatever. Yep. So how do you run a campaign where when you hear rhetoric that you don't want to call it fascist, let's just say authoritarian, right? Oh. Whatever you want to call it. No, I'm saying
I got you.
However you want to define that, the definitions don't matter. There were threats of retribution. There was the issue of women's reproductive choices and health pounding up against the price of groceries, the price of gasoline. How do you balance that when obviously what voters said was we care more about the price of gas and we care more about the price of groceries? How do you do that?
At that moment, look, I think life is a struggle between the urgent and the important. Right. And I think for a lot of people, the urgent issues they face are about affordability. Right. And here's where Democrats, and about feelings of personal safety, here's where Democrats got to get the big things right. If people don't feel safe, if they don't feel economically secure, everything else is secondary.
Right.
So that's why Democrats got to get stronger on these issues that count most.
Well, and by the way, how condescending is it when people say, oh, no, you know, things are safe and da-da-da-da, and oh, the southern border doesn't. It's something Willie and I have been talking about for 4 years now. Don't let people steal $999 worth of clothes from a store
right.
and say, oh, that shouldn't be a felony.
No, quality of life policing works. Right. Let's stop, it's got nothing to do with plainclothes divisions or stop and frisk, frankly. It's just about saying that, look, if you let a broken window not get fixed, it encourages more broken windows. When you decriminalize low-level crime, you get more of it. Then people push back and they elect extremes. So there's a responsibility for the center-left in particular in blue states, to stand up, get strong, push back against illiberalism on the left or the right, and make sure we're not falling into that trap. Because if people don't feel safe and they don't feel economically secure, everything else is secondary.
John Avlon, thank you very much. Come back,
Thanks, guys.
will you?
Anytime. Pleasure.
Okay.
Thanks.